G'day guys and welcome back to the channel. So a couple of months ago now I released a video of the Landcruiser 200 series self-recovering using the factory crawl control feature. Now I got a lot of feedback on that video and it's given me some ideas to do some tests today to see whether or not we can expedite or increase the efficiency of a self-recovery on sand. So today we're going to test a few different features of the crawl control function on sand to see what works and what doesn't, and what you should do if you get stuck in sand. So guys, I'd firstly like to start by saying thank you to those who did comment and interacted with that video. Not only that, but those who comment on my videos every week or on a regular basis. This is what gives me ideas and motivation to continue doing these videos and provides a lot of feedback in regards to the way I do these videos, and also provokes discussions in the comment section for all the other viewers to see as well. So guys, the majority of the feedback I got on that last video was in relation to the manner of my driving and the way in which I use the crawl control to self-recover from that bog. So today's video we're going to be doing a few tests to see whether or not the speed of the crawl control and or steering input has any bearing on how quickly or how efficiently you can self-recover from a bog. Today we've driven down to the south coast of Western Australia, and this, as you can see by the way the car is parked here, is going to prove to be the perfect testing ground to see whether or not those different speeds and different manner of driving will affect the way in which the crawl control functions and how quickly you can self-recover from a bog. Now the idea here today is that we're going to try and put the cruiser on as flat as ground as possible using the most consistent sand we can find. Now obviously we are in a sand dune system, so we're going to have to carefully pick where we get the cruiser stuck, and that's going to be the other issue as well. What we're going to do here is we're going to try and drive the vehicle and then brake heavily, trying to put it into a bog and try and get those wheels spinning in the sand. We're going to start off with a slow speed test, just using the crawl control function on its slowest first speed, moving up to a high speed test. Depending on which one of those is more efficient, we're then going to move on to doing a test in a straight line and then including its steering input to see whether that also makes a difference. The other thing we're going to be doing during these tests as well, and a question that was asked a few times in the last video, is that we're going to be monitoring the gearbox temperatures as well. As you can imagine, the car is put under a lot of load and a lot of stress during these scenarios, and therefore the torque converter does increase in temperature. So we're going to be reading those out as well, making sure they don't get too hot, and also just seeing how the different driving styles affect the gearbox temperatures. So let's head down to some flat sand and try and get this cruiser bogged. Okay, so we've finally got bogged here in the sand. We're pretty deep down, so we're going to stick it into drive, activate the crawl control function, and we're going to turn it down to a low speed. This is going to be our first test. We'll see what happens. Okay, so we can see here it's moving very, very slowly. It's definitely taking its time. So we've got two gearbox temperatures to look at as well while we're doing this. The first one is going to be the pan temperature. So that's going to be the bulk of your gearbox oil inside the gearbox itself. At the moment we're sitting at about 78 degrees. The other temperature we need to have a look at though is a torque converter. This is the one that's going to be put under a lot of strain during this test, and we can see already it's 121 degrees. So you need to make sure you keep an eye on that when you're doing these types of activities, just to make sure that it doesn't get excessively hot. So I actually did this test again off camera for a second time, and I achieved the same result as you're about to see in a few seconds. So just keep in mind, during the testing the ambient temperature was about 27 degrees. There we go, so we've hit 150 degrees here in the torque converter, and that's therefore activated an alert on the dash saying we've got high automatic transmission. So we really didn't move much at all there in the low speed test, and now we're going to have to wait for that those temps to cool back down before we can restart. Okay, so the temps have come back down, the torque converter down to 97, pan sitting there at 86 degrees. So we'll start up again. I'm not going to go back into the low speed again though. As we saw from that first test, it really didn't get us very far at all. So we're going to go straight to the high speed test and see what sort of effect that has. lot of shuttering in the car here at the moment, but we definitely are making progress. Torque converter temperatures are now at 103 degrees, and our pan temperatures are 85. There we go, and we're out of the bog. So we'll turn crawl control off. Torque converter temperatures there at 105.6 at maximum, and the pan at 86.9 degrees. I'm going to try and get bogged very close to where I just used crawl control, and give us the best sort of chance to have a consistent testing ground. So as you can see, the car is really bogged down here. We're actually resting on that rear axle and the front of the spare tyre there. Moving around to the side of the vehicle, again the passenger side chassis rail is actually sitting on the sand, and we can see there the front wheel is really far down, also allowing the lower control arm to rest on the sand as well, which is why that wheel has lost traction. So looking at the front of the vehicle, we can see those bash plates are also resting up on the sand there, again another reason as to why we've lost traction. On the driver's side, we can see the sand there piled up underneath the chassis rail, and this rear driver's wheel has really sunk down again, allowing the axle just to rest on the sand. Okay, so as we can see there, we're well and truly bogged. So now we're going to be trying crawl control function again, just putting a bit of steering input in this time to see whether or not it more efficiently gets us out of this situation. So we're just going to use speed 4 out of 5, we'll just see how that goes. The steering input definitely has a bearing on which wheels are getting more traction. You can sort of feel the car sink down in each of the corners as you turn the wheel there. Torque converter temperatures at 110 degrees, pan temperatures at 85, and we are clear of that bog. So we can see here that the Cruiser got bogged in relatively the same place on both tests, but we can also see here the tracks closest to the camera is the tracks with the steering input. We can see that we got out of that bog a little quicker than that test without the steering input. So there we have it, guys. There's a couple more examples of the Toyota crawl control on sand. So as we can see, it works really, really well. I'm yet to actually get bogged in this car and have to use max tracks or a shovel. Every time I get bogged, I can chuck it into the crawl control or just lower tire pressures a little bit more, and it seems to get out every single time. So what we picked up from this particular test today is that the slow speed test, although it is progressive and it does move the car very, very slowly, it does allow the torque converter temperature to increase a little bit too much, and therefore activates the high gearbox temperature alarm on the vehicle. So the Toyota's gearbox alarms are programmed to come on at 150 degrees, which is exactly when it came on according to the ultra gauge here. Once that torque converter hit 150 degrees Celsius, the car stopped crawl control, went into limp mode, and an alert came on the dash asking to pull over and stop to allow those temperatures to decrease. Our next test there was continuing from that same bog that we had there in the sand in the high-speed test. Now what we did see there is a lot of aggressive shuddering, however it very quickly got us out of that bog very easily. So moving on to our second test there, what we did use is a slightly slower speed just to try and avoid that aggressive shuddering that was experienced in the first one, and then we added in some steering input as well. Now, I think what we're going to figure out here with the steering input is really going to be scenario based, and depending on where you're stuck and what the circumstances are surrounding that bog. If you're on an angle, for example, going uphill, downhill, side to side, steering input is definitely going to assist at some level. If you're on a slight slope, say right to left, and you steer down the slope, then you are very likely going to get out of that bog a little bit quicker than if you just went straight. What we saw from this one here as we were on that slight slope is that we saw the vehicle sort of slide down the slope a little bit, or four wheels. So if we did that, we would have just ended up crabbing around the side of the slope rather than getting up and out of the bog. So guys, what we've discovered today is there's no right or wrong way to use the Toyota CRAWL control system. It is going to be very much circumstance and scenario based. It's going to depend on a whole lot of environmental factors, like the type of sand you're driving on, whether it is dunes or a beach or some other hard packed flat surface, whether it's on a slope, uphill, downhill, and depending on how hard or how far underneath the surface that hard packed sand is. You're also going to have to take in consideration your vehicle factors as well. The size of your tyres and the weight of your car will also affect the way in which the CRAWL control system works and how efficiently it will work at those low speeds with the gearbox temperatures. So for me guys, my go-to setting for the CRAWL control when stuck in sand is probably going to be speed 3 or 4 out of 5, and this is going to help to get out of the bog quicker. We saw there from the slow speed test, the longer you're in that bog, the harder the vehicle has to work, and it gives the vehicle the chance to build up those transmission temperatures to an extreme temperature where therefore it shuts off. Using a higher speed will get you out of that bog quickly, and I guess the steering input is all going to depend on the circumstances you're driving in. So guys, I hope this video has been informative, giving you a bit of an idea about what to think about if you're planning on using CRAWL control in a sand bog. But one thing you will have the confidence of knowing is that it works really, really well. Like I said earlier, I'm yet to have to dig out of a bog. This CRAWL control function has got me out every single time. So guys, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Cheers.